Let's get to one of the biggest stories in the economy and markets for the current business week. The Nigeria's new Monetary Policy Committee decided to leave all rate parameters unchanged. But what's the outlook on what other decisions will be taken when we move on to the rest of the year and the other MPC meetings with a new team now with Godwin Emefiele? Let's get Bismarck Rewane, who is the CEO at Financial Derivatives Company and economic contributor to Channels Television, on the phone to give us a few minutes of his thoughts on where we are and where the MPC is headed. Mr. Rewane, good morning. It's good to have your few minutes with us here on the program.
Good morning, both.
Yes, your outlook at the FTC was that it is time, and you've been consistent, that the MPC has the opportunity now to cut interest rate. That did not happen on Tuesday. When and how soon do you think this should happen?
It will happen, first and foremost, the Central Bank Governor did say that the MPC is on standby and is willing to intervene at short notice, irrespective of the timetable of the MPC. So, if anything were to justify a movement in rates in between now and May, they would do it. So they are on standby and they're ready to do that. Secondly, the central bank did mention that because of the fear and the risks of inflationary pressures and external imbalances, they were being cautious this time by kicking the can down the road a little bit. But my outlook is that I think, and I believe strongly, that the central bank, bearing in mind the problem of the minimum wage adjustment, bearing in mind the problem that could arise because of reversal of investment flows, was being cautious. But the caution is going to stop now. I'm confident that they will do everything possible within the next 2 months to begin to lower rates, the policy rates. But let me make one thing clear. The nominal rates in the economy, that is the treasury rates, both at the secondary market and the primary market, have actually declined by over 300 basis points in the last 3 to 4 months. So effectively, we're in a declining interest rate environment. What we need to watch out for is that does lower interest rate means more? Does it mean more credit to the private sector? No. What is the central bank going to do in this respect? The two things. One, they say they will selectively intervene with some special intervention programs to make credit available to the the more vulnerable and the more needy. But secondly, we are going to see a de-risking of the environment. In other words, the central bank is insisting, and rightfully so, that the banks that have weak capital adequacy should actually reduce their dividend payout, build the buffers so that they are able to lend. In other words, lending to the private sector is a function of risk, liquidity, and price. The liquidity and price we can have a handle on, but risk is a combination of effort between the central bank on one hand, the banking system on the other, and the borrowers.
Mr. Rewane, what level of inflation do you think will be accommodating enough for the MPC to decide to cut interest rate?
Cumulatively, we've seen inflation come down by almost 4% in the last 13 months. And if you look at it properly, we are projecting also that this month we are going to see inflation rate come down to 13.5%. Core inflation is at 11%, while your policy rate is at 14%. There's a big gap between your core inflation has brought down interest rates by 550 basis points. And what happened? The inflation actually declined by almost 7% in the last 1 year. It's now inflation is not 10%. Kenya.
Mr. Rewane.
Yes.
Yes, I'm sorry we need to cut this conversation at this point. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your comments on where we are as far as the MPC decision was concerned and what to expect moving forward. Some outlook there as to when the central bank is expected to cut interest rate and the conditions precedent and the need to de-risk the environment. Of course, part of what the central bank told the fiscal authorities was to cut back on aggregate expenditure and stimulate domestic savings and how to boost consumer spending. All that were part of the communique that we listened to on Wednesday at the end of the two-day MPC, the first of it in 2018. But let's get back to what's making the headlines today. Now, Nigeria yesterday formally unveiled its National Economic Diplomacy Initiative by the acronym NEDI. That was formally unveiled late yesterday afternoon, and now we're looking at how Nigeria will pursue an aggressive international economic diplomacy under the umbrella of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, as well as the Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industry, and of course a few other agencies that will be working with the Foreign Affairs Ministry. That include the NIPC, the Nigeria Investment Promotion Commission, and of course the Nigerian Office on Trade Negotiations. Meantime, the Vice President yesterday checked with the progress being made as far as the economic and recovery growth plan was concerned. The Vice President was briefed on what progress has been made since the President Buhari a few weeks ago formally unveiled the 4 new focused laboratories of the ERGP, which will be the 4 pillars on which the ERGP continue to make progress, in particular in relationship with the private sector. And of course, we all know how that will pace out. Under the ERGP, Nigeria is focusing on GDP growth rate of about 2.3% this year. The IMF came out 2 days ago and says Nigeria's GDP growth is forecast about 2.1%, a little bit consistent with the Nigerian authorities. And next Tuesday, we have the Nigeria's green bond trying to become, and of course keeping the promise to become, the first sovereign issuer of green bond in sub-Saharan Africa. The Nigerian Stock Exchange and the FMDQ OTC Securities Exchange will warehouse or will see the admission. That's what will happen. It's called a flow and an admission of this bond. We have no idea how much would actually be listed, but we're looking at something in a double digit of billions of naira. This bond seeks to raise money from investors for Nigeria to invest in critical renewable energy assets or projects across the country. And that will be part of what we'll listen to, how this bond will be invested in, who qualifies to invest in them, how much is being raised, what's the tenor for the first tranche that is now being floated. All of that will be part of the conversation on Tuesday, first in the morning at FMDQ, OTC Securities Exchange, and later in the afternoon before the closing bell on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, 2:30 local time. We'll keep an eye on that as well. Meantime, the conversation around Wando Nigeria PLC is continuing. The troubled energy trader has written that to the Nigerian Stock Exchange, asking that the suspension ordered by the SEC in the 3rd week of October last year be lifted, saying that the shareholders, 270,000 shareholders of Wando Nigeria PLC, are now benefiting from the market rally, and they have been hurt by this technical suspension. The SEC back then, under Munir Guazo leadership, the Securities and Exchange set up investigation panel to do forensic audit of the books of account. The new administration or the new leadership at SEC says the boot is already on the ground, but why is the technical suspension lifting on Wando is imperative. This is part of the conversation we are following for you here on Business Morning. We'll be right back in 2 minutes.